Hello and welcome to the Business for Superheroes show. I'm Vicky Fraser and today I'm here with a very special guest, someone who can show us how to seduce a journalist. This is PR. You now looks fine. This is PR expert Jamie Veitch, and he is here to talk about PR and how amazing it is. So Jamie, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi Vicky, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, sorry.
Podfly guys can
get
rid of that. Sorry. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome, and yeah, brilliant. Tell us what you do for a living.
Well, what I do is I help businesses and charities and social enterprises to communicate more effectively. So that is to secure media coverage that they deserve, that reflects their achievements, and to get coverage, to build relationships with journalists and their media.
Okay, cool. That all sounds amazing, and we'll talk in a bit more detail about that because that's what we're talking about in this podcast. But what's your background? How did you get into this stuff?
Well, good question. I began by running a different type of business. I was a children's magician, and
really?
I paid my way through university by being a children's magician, and taught me a really interesting lesson about storytelling and marketing, which I could come on to later on. But after university, went to London, worked for a small publishing company. It was bought twice, and I found myself working for the Mirror Group, Mirror PLC, and I ended up running a division of Mirror Group with about 10 magazines and a few exhibitions and events. And that was okay, but then three colleagues, including myself, left the Mirror Group to start our own business, our own magazine publishing company, which we then ran for 12 years, grew to £1 million turnover business and about 15 staff. Wow. And then for the last, with all sorts of ups, downs, and all sorts of in-betweens on the way. So quite exciting ride. And then 7 years ago, I went into consulting, and I've been consulting with businesses, with charities, with social enterprises ever since. And that has involved helping them get the media coverage that they deserve, that reflects their achievements, reflects great things that they do. Sometimes being the spokesperson for them on the radio. So that started by getting media interviews for them, and then a couple of my clients saying, actually, can you do the interview for me? And oh, all right then. And so the first one I did was quite an exciting one. It happened an hour earlier than it was meant to, which meant, although I was really well prepared, I had two exceptionally hungry cats climbing up my legs whilst I was on the phone to the BBC. But because of my background running a business, I do a bit of business strategy, marketing and communication strategy work. And most of my work is about media. That involves writing and talking. But sometimes clients ask me to write pieces for them that are published in their name, or even to write tenders on their behalf. So if that fits with what I'm doing at the time, I will do that. But my main focus of work is media communications and earning media coverage that reflects people's achievements.
Cool, and I'm so glad that you're in, because I should also say Jamie is one of my superheroes, and I'm so glad you're in the group because you just bring this amazing wealth of knowledge, this deep background knowledge of media and communications, which is just completely awesome.
Well, thank you. And without getting into mutual backslapping, I have to say, you've assembled a great group there. It's really, really dynamic bunch of people, very, very supportive, mutually supportive. Full credit to you as well. And it's a great investment. It's really valuable for me.
Oh, thank you. No, those people are just ace. I mean, the group is only as good as the people in it, and they are fab. So it's cool. Anyway, enough of that. Before I dive into kind of stuff about journalists and the media, you mentioned this when we were discussing the podcast, and I'm intrigued. So, and I'm sure everybody else is. What is all this fake news that we're hearing about? Tell us about that.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, where's the balance between opinion and actual fake? I mean. Yeah. If you were an avid newspaper reader for the last 100 years, you could pick up two different newspapers, two different serious broadsheet newspapers, and you could find that, particularly when it comes to political reporting, of course, the lines that two different newspapers were taking were very, very different. which one's true, which one's false? Neither. They're perhaps both opinions, but they're written in the news, in the newspaper. So fake news isn't necessarily new, and it's perhaps been going on for a couple of thousand years. There's a wonderful book that I suggest that people should read called Writing on the Wall, Social Media, the First 2,000 Years.
Yes.
It's great. I've got it down here. It's written by someone from The Economist, and talks about sharing news, but putting your own spin on it, in effect. But okay, what about fake news that we're starting to hear about? Well, first of all, we're into a really different era of politics, aren't we? With opinionated people being picked up by the media because they're interesting. They're saying something interesting, and my industry, the PR and media industry, has trained a lot of people to be really bland and boring. I mean, that's appalling. So there are loads of great people doing wonderful things, but being utterly boring about it, and the media doesn't necessarily want to know. Now, if you want an exciting read, and you could go and pick up Ofcom's Media Attitudes and Use Survey in all its 147 pages, but I've read it, so you don't have to. And,
thank you.
And you can be glad of that. They ask people if people can distinguish between fake news and real news, and between things like advertising on Google and organic results. And everyone says they can, but then when people are tested on it, people actually can't. And the fake news that we're seeing comes because newspapers have different, perhaps, political allegiances or ideological approaches to society's problems, if you like. They might want the same result, but have a different idea in terms of how to get there. So they have political allegiances, or it comes because it's driven by money. You know, loads of things are driven by money, aren't they? Yeah. And it's easier than ever for anyone to be a publisher and to set up a website, to monetize that website through clicks, whether it's enabling advertising on your website or being paid for the traffic or whatever. And so that has incentivized people to create emotionally driven stories that people will click on. And then other people, perhaps not so responsibly minded people, have jumped on that. They haven't necessarily cared whether anything's true. It's sort of, they're getting a result for it. They're changing opinions, or they're getting money. Yeah. So, but there's a backlash. There's a full fact project that looks at fake news, and Facebook and Google are doing more and more themselves to analyze fake news. I could go on and on about this, but I've written a paper about it, which I can, in 7 pages, gives a bit of information, which I can let your listeners have if anyone wants it.
Yeah, well, at the end, I'm going to ask you where we can find out more about you, so you can tell us that then.
Grand.
That'll be in the show notes for people. The link will be there. So that was really interesting. And I hope everybody was kind of picking up on the important stuff for them in there, which is like the storytelling, the emotional triggers, the things that get people, the reasons why fake news is so successful, I guess. So, but I want to move on to because we could talk for hours about this. It's also interesting. But I want to move on to get a few things in for people, a few kind of practical things. So people moan about journalists in the media, particularly after the whole phone hacking shenanigans and fiasco, but they're good people, aren't they? And I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what pressures they're under and how we can work with them, and what they're really trying to do, because it's kind of like politics. I think people go into it with good intentions and then they just get hijacked. So
yeah, absolutely. Yes, they are good people, and they are under more and more pressures from both cuts in the newsroom. So traditional media is under more financial pressures. Newspapers sell less printed copies. They have tried to deal with that by selling advertising online. Some news outlets are paywall protected, like the Financial Times. Some are not, like the Guardian. Some are a mixture, like the Times or the Economist. You can get 1 or 2 articles for free per month, and then you have to register or you have to start paying. But news outlets are under financial pressure and resource pressure. So journalists have to do more with less time. So they're under significant pressure. Are journalists good people? Some are, some aren't. I mean,
Yeah.
like any industry, really.
Yeah.
But most journalists, right, they really care about their work. They care a lot about getting it right and about sharing good, valuable content that's valuable to their readers. And the readers of one journalist and one media outlet will be very different to others. So what makes news for one journalist might be totally different to what makes news for a different journalist.
Yeah, that's a really good point. 'Cause I think people think of the media as being this like big homogenous mass, and it's not, is it? It's personality driven and people driven.
Absolutely, yes. Really glad you said that. People to people, really. And whether you're in a business to business environment, the news is still about people, and media is about the people behind what you're doing as well.
Yeah. So how can we work better with? Actually, no, we'll come back to that later because I just wanted to talk a little bit first about PR and how great it is and why it's worth people's effort, because I think it's massively underused by most small businesses.
It is. You're absolutely right. I don't know why it's so underused, but that means if you do choose to use it, then you can reap the benefits.
Yeah.
First of all, you need to be good at what you do. It's not in my interests to pitch a story to a journalist that's nonsense or that is a lie or that misrepresents you or that builds you up to be something you're not, for example. So I would actually say no, no, this isn't a story. However, if you're good at what you do and if you're an expert, and this is a really crucial thing actually, if you're an expert in your industry and you have an opinion in your industry, then you can get great PR. I know we're going to come on to this a little bit later on. But why it's so valuable as a tool is, first of all, reputation. So if you've been covered in good quality, reputable media, which might be a small niche trade publication, or it could be the national media or your local media, it depends what's appropriate and relevant to you. But if you've been covered, then the readers of that publication find out about you. So that's great for people discovering you. It's great for discoverability. Often it's also great for ranking of your sites if media are linking to you. But thirdly, it's great for the perception of people you're already working with or that you want to influence. Oh, wow, that Vicky Fraser, she's writing a column in this highly prestigious magazine. So they don't get anyone to write a column. They only get experts. She must be really good. I'd better join her superheroes, for example. And so people do still trust the media. Despite the media's many faults, we do trust a lot of the media. And that perception, that trust, because it is hard won. You know, often the media, including, say, my local media in Sheffield, the business editor of the weekly business section, he probably gets 200 pitches per week, and he can run 5 exciting business stories. Yeah. So if you're the one that's been chosen, you've been through that filter, it's seen as a valuable thing, and other people see it that way too. So that's one really good benefit. And it can help influence people you're already trying to engage with and develop a relationship with. Very briefly, because I know time is short, another quick benefit of PR is actually morale. If you're running a business and you employ staff, and we're in low unemployment at the moment in the UK, for example. So if you want to attract really talented people to work with you, and they're reading about you, then it can help. It can really help that way too.
Well, that's a benefit that I hadn't really thought of, actually, because obviously I don't have staff, so it doesn't really cross my mind that much. But yeah, so okay, so how do people get through this filter? You mentioned this filter. They get like 200 pitches a week, and they get probably quite a lot of crap sent to them, judging by what I see sometimes. And so how do we get through this filter, this journalist filter?
Another good question, a brilliant question. I'm still presenting I present a weekly radio show myself on an FM radio station in Sheffield about business and social enterprise. So I'm on loads of media lists. I get loads and loads of pitches, press releases and pitches for guests. And when I ran the magazine publishing company, which was a magazine circulation of 15,000 people, it was a small magazine, but they were very senior in their industry, so it was quite influential. We used to get pitches all the time, And the journalists I work with nowadays, they get pitches all the time, of course. So how should you approach the media? First of all, you want to show them that you value them and their media outlet. So it's so frustrating, so annoying when a journalist gets a press release and they're just BCC'd. So, you've sent it to 250 people and it's not relevant to half of them because you've got a media list, which is possibly out of date. And you've written something on the lines of, here's the latest press release from X, Y, and Z. And the journalist thinks, so what? So does it pass the so what test?
I love the so what test.
Yeah. Or the who gives test, or whatever, however you want to put it. Yeah. But so does it pass that test? Secondly, make it relevant to that media. So you could write to the journalist personally. So you can show them that you are engaged with their media. You're a reader or a watcher or a listener, and that you value their media. So I'm far more likely, because I'm an egotistical idiot, obviously, to respond well to someone for my radio show if they email me and say, "Hi, Jamie, I loved your show last week. It was a really interesting interview with whoever I interviewed. And I wonder if you'd be able to consider my client to be on your radio show because they are X, Y, and Z." So then I think, okay, A, they've listened to my radio show, or at least they've told me they have. And B, they have some idea of what I actually cover on my radio show. And the same if you're pitching the media. If I were to pitch the Sheffield Telegraph and email 15 journalists at the Sheffield Telegraph with a press release, that's just sort of silly scattergun approach. If I email one journalist and say, "Hi, Ellen, I've got a piece about so-and-so, and I thought this would fit the whatever page." And in other words, I'm saying to Ellen, I read your stuff. I know that you're responsible for that particular page, and this is a fit for it. So.
Yeah, that's such good advice, because I'm like you. I mean, I don't have a radio show, and my 3 listeners on the podcast now. I'm just kidding, I have one. But I actually do get quite a lot of pitches from people, and they're just like, "Hi, I've got this thing," and blah blah blah, and I'm like, "You've clearly never listened to my podcast. Why am I even reply to you?" And it's very frustrating. So
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a difference as well between news and a pitch, and there's a real reason for getting news out there. But I dug out a couple of definitions of news that I thought you might be interested in. One is news is change that is relevant to the journalist's audience. So that's a lovely definition. I really like that.
Great definition.
Yeah, it doesn't come from me. It comes from someone called Robert Taylor. And but it's an excellent definition, because what is relevant to one journalist audience won't be relevant to a different journalist audience. But change, so something is happening, something is new, relevance to the audience. So they're key. A couple of other definitions of actual news. I think there was one about it was what people are talking about over a pint. So that's always a good one. And there's an old one from an editor, I think, of the Daily Mirror. I've got it here. Crime, love, money, and food was. So that's news. But I'll give you one final definition of news, and this is from the British Journalism Handbook, and this is from the editor of ITV News. She was Deborah Turness, and she's quoted in the Journalism Handbook. And she said, broadcast news, every single news item should perform an emotional function. It should clarify or reassure or explain or shock. So, yeah. So you've sort of asked about the, press releases or pitches. Whether we send press releases or pitches, and I think business owners need to do both. Okay. But a press release should be news. It should be genuinely change and relevant.
Yeah.
And it should still say, "Hi, Alan, or hi, Emma, I think this story is relevant to you because, and here's the press release below. And I would say, and of course, I know you might not be have space for this, but my client Jane would be prepared to offer commentary on the topics of X, Y, and Z as well. And then I'm sort of saying to Emma, I know you might not be able to fit this in. I'm pitching it to you because I think it's relevant to you. But if you can't, then come back to us. Jane can offer commentary as well, whatever. So
yeah, you're getting like 2 bites of the cake almost. That's
yeah.
really good advice. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's amazing advice. That's really, really cool. I just want to kind of get a couple more tips in. So we've already talked a little bit about the best way to approach a journalist, but would you suggest email, phone? What would you do in kind of practical terms?
I would usually start with email. I think you can phone journalists up. You have to be really careful that you don't phone them up on deadline day. And I know what it's like as a journalist, lurching from deadline to deadline and constantly pressured and being in the middle of the story and interrupted. So if I'm a journalist, then I can be batch checking my emails twice a day. If I get a phone call when I'm in the middle of something, then I might not give that person much attention. So if you do choose to phone people, don't phone them up and say, hello, have you got my press release? Because that really annoys them. That really, really annoys them. If you do choose to phone a journalist, choose to phone them the day after they've gone to press or whatever. Obviously, that's harder if they're on a daily. But try and find out the best time to phone them. Phone them up and say, you'd like to meet with them, you'd like to talk with them. When would be the best time? But initially I approach by email.
Okay. Cool, thank you for that. Have you got? Okay, actually, I'm just going to skip forward a bit in my list of questions because it's just like what you kind of touched on it a couple of times. But what really pisses journalists off about us small business owners?
Not saying anything of interest. I mean, obviously, your raison d'etre really is to help people be more interesting. And so many business owners are. I'm pulling my computer around. Sorry. So many business owners are dull, and they're not dull people, but they present themselves in a dull way, and you don't have to do that. Be yourself and have an opinion, and presenting a story that isn't new, that doesn't pass the so what test. And that's really, really annoying. And apart from that, the sort of bulk pitch that we talked about earlier, that is exceptionally annoying for journalists as well. And the other thing is, you pitch a journalist comes back to you and asks for more information, and you don't give it. And you'd be amazed how often this happens.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. And I've sometimes been on the BBC when they have been let down by a guest. And you think, well, someone has pitched you, got a guest on, and you've been let down. They need to fill that time. They need someone who can come and talk. And from my point of view, with the radio show that I present, sometimes I'll book someone on for a live interview, because live is always great fun on the radio, of course. Yeah. And if they're not there, it's a real pain. And it really annoys journalists, and I will have a long memory and they will never come on my radio show ever again.
Well, you see, that's funny, and you're talking in a funny voice, but that's a really good point, because you do not want to get on a journalist's bad side, do you? Because they will never talk to you again. And, why would you want to risk that? You could build a great relationship. So, okay, conversely then, what's the best way to approach a journalist or publication and build a really strong, lasting relationship so they come back to you again and again?
Good question. Read their media or listen to their programs. So if you are pitching a particular program, what's the most valuable media outlet for you? Get to know it, get to enjoy it. If it's valuable to you, your industry, relevant to you, it should be something that you engage with anyway. So build a relationship where you are genuinely, this has to be genuine, but you are sharing other stories from that outlet that you think are good. So for example, social media, much maligned, can be a real time suck, but it can be really good for building a relationship with journalists. So if a journalist has published a story, they might have tweeted it out. If you think it's a good story and an interesting story that journalist has written, then share it yourself, retweet it. The journalist will see you've done that. Add your comment. This was a good piece. Or if you if you genuinely think it's not a good story, or if you generally have a difference of opinion, say, about the industry that they're writing about, that they've written a story about, again, share the story and add your notice to that effect, not in a personal attack on the journalist, but presenting your opinion. So you're engaging. So you're not just sort of about trying to get your voice heard. You are sharing other media, you're sharing other things that journalist has put out, and that journalist will notice you doing so. And then in all of your pitches to journalists, try and emphasize the fact that you understand what they need, what they're looking for. So as we've said earlier, they're under more and more pressure. So you need to be able to give them material that's ready for publication, if you like. So if I'm a journalist and I know you can give me 500 words, and I'm not going to be faffing around with it, and a great picture for a particular slot in my newspaper or whatever, then that could be really valuable.
Cool. This has been so great. I've got so many more questions to ask you, but you know what? If people want to listen to them, and they should, they're going to have to join the Superheroes, because you're doing a special teleclass with us, aren't you, soon?
Yes, I'm really excited about that. And yes, there are loads more questions. I know. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
No, it's perfect, because we're gonna. This is all really valuable stuff for everybody. Anyway, so I'm kind of making mental notes myself. I'm going to listen back to it. But yeah, we'll cover so much more in the teleclass for everybody, because we'll have like a full hour to do so, and we won't have to go into so much detail about this stuff, because they can listen to the podcast, so we've got loads of time. But just before we finish, I'm going to ask you where they can find you in a minute, but what's your biggest takeaway for people when it comes to PR, would you say? What's the biggest?
Brilliant question.
Remember?
Brilliant question. Invest and engage with the media that you want to cover you. So in other words, it's not a sort of, I'm going to pitch 100 titles, scattergun. What's the most valuable media for you to get covered in, and engage with it? In other words, if you're not a reader of it or a watcher of it or a listener to it, then you don't stand a chance. So invest your time, but also actually invest your money. In other words, buy subscriptions to media, support good quality journalism. If you like the way the Financial Times, which is renowned for fact checking, covers things, then get a subscription. It's about £30 a month. Or The Economist, or your trade press, or even media that's free. Whether you, if you like The Guardian, for example, and the way they cover it, you can read it all online for free. But if you think that, if you're someone who thinks that their particular coverage is good, then join their membership scheme. Or your trade publications, whatever business you're in, subscribe to the trade publications, even if they have only a small number of a small circulation. They're hugely valuable, and often you actually get the best results from trade publications as well, because they're read by the influencers in your sector. So sorry, that was a long answer. That was one tip: invest and engage. So, and then I suppose the other thing is, quite often, particularly if you want local BBC coverage, your local BBC channel will post on their Facebook page what they want people to, cover that week. So BBC Radio Sheffield, on their Facebook page, they'll post regularly saying, we're looking for people to talk about X, Y, and Z. So if you're watching that, you know what they're after.
Yeah, that was a great tip.
It's been really useful for many of my clients.
Yeah. Oh, I hope everybody pays attention and actually does this stuff.
You said 3 biggest media tips. So invest and engage, watch the social media, and I could talk about crowdsourcing or collaboration, or I could talk about Google News Alerts. Both are really, really important. But I'd say set up Google News Alerts. Yeah.
I was going to say, let's save crowdsourcing for the teleclass.
Yeah, good.
Cool. Yeah, Google News Alerts. Yeah, that's a great thing. Just set up. Yeah. How would somebody go about doing that? Not the technical details, but what would they look for?
Go onto Google, a phrase that's relevant to your industry. So it's about change. Type in a phrase, not one word, but a phrase that's about change in your industry. So whatever your industry you're in, and set up a news alert when prompted on Google to do so. That will come into your email. So you might then find that the Financial Times is writing about responsible and ethical finance, for example. That's relevant to one of my clients. And the article comes out, you see it immediately thanks to a Google News alert. You can A, share it on social media and engage with the journalist. B, you can write in the comments. So this is a sort of tip goes with Google News alerts. Write in the comments, particularly on media like the Financial Times. Talk about your experience and relevance to it, and that can help engage with journalists too. So Google News alerts will keep you up to date, and it will get you perhaps so you could be one of the first to respond to a new article when it's published. Great way of getting a journalist's attention too.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I can't wait for the teleclass now. It's going to be really, really good.
I can't wait either.
Cool. Okay, right. We've run out of time, sadly. So everybody, if you want to hear more from Jamie, and you should, then you should totally join the superheroes and come to the teleclass. But also, where can everybody find out more about you and what you do and get that thing that you mentioned earlier?
Brilliant, super. Well, I have written a guide of 7 or possibly 8, actually, because it's changing a lot. Media disruptions that people need to know about. So media's changing, robo-journalism and so on. So you can get that from my website, Jamie Veitch, JamieVeitch.co.uk. And if you go to jamieveitch.co.uk/valuable, as in worth something, and then you'll be prompted and you can download the guide and to get some more tips and ideas.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jamie. That's brilliant. Thanks for providing that as well. It's just been awesome. So thank you for coming on the show.
Well, it's been great fun, Vicky. Thanks so much for inviting me. Really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the teleclass. Yay!
Awesome. Cool. Well, that's just been great. I'm really chuffed with the whole thing. Next week, Joe is back. So Joe fans will be pleased about that. As I say, call to action this week is basically go to Jamie's site and download his thing. The link will be in the show notes, so you can kind of go straight to the podcast page and download that. If you like this podcast, please go subscribe in iTunes or wherever the hell you get your podcasts from. Leave us a review because it helps more people find us, and it makes us smile and boosts our big egos. Or share it. If you know somebody who will enjoy this, send them a link, vickyfraser.com/podcast. So thanks again, Jamie. Thanks very much, dear listeners, and I'll be back same time next week.